everything you need to know about the Condemned franchise. We are back again with another masterpiece of a game franchise. Today, we will be talking about the horror first-person adventure stealth game franchise, The Condemned. One of the most popular genres in gaming are first-person melee fights, which is sad because decent ones are harder to come by than Fabergé eggs. Only a few games have the first-person brawling or swashbuckling, and in many of them, such as Skyrim or Dark Messiah, it's only a small portion of the entire experience, mixed in with magic and stealth. Games like Zeno Clash and Chivalry Medieval Warfare, which rely almost completely on the mechanism, are even rarer. This isn't especially unexpected, given how tough it is to make first-person melee fighting feel decent. Not only do you have to cope with control systems that aren't designed to mimic the surprisingly complex nature of one person swinging a heavy object at another person swinging a heavy object, but the player's field of view and ability to judge distance is severely limited by the first-person perspective. It's awkwardly designed in many respects. It misleads you at first into believing it's just another regular shooter, even giving you a handgun as your initial weapon. However, there are a few hints that may imply otherwise. And let's not forget, it is a horror game. To different people, horror signifies different things. To some, it entails a thrilling voyage filled with thrilling scenes and extreme chills. Others interpret it as a very unique emotion and feeling that comes with fear. If you belong to any category, then you will really enjoy the Condemned franchise. Let's look at the two games individually. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Condemned: Criminal Origins. The player controls the protagonist, Ethan Thomas, who is an FBI agent and is falsely accused of murdering his co-workers when a serial murder he was hunting kills them. Serial Killer X is a guy who murders other killers using the same techniques as them. He's a nefarious vigilante who murders Ethan's co-workers with his own service gun. Following that, Ethan embarks on a dark, dimly lighted journey to clear his reputation by apprehending the nasty SKX and demonstrating his own innocence. The game is set in the fictional American city of Metro. Like I said before, Ethan works for the FBI's Serial Crime Unit as a crime scene investigator, works in the city's seedier areas. As he seeks the elusive Serial Killer X, who had framed him for murder, his trip takes him through a variety of condemned buildings. Along the way, Ethan must utilize his investigative intuition and technology to study evidence left behind by SKX, all while battling the brutally psychotic residents of Metro City, who appear to be driven insane by a strange, though seemingly unrelated force. Even though the game is totally played in the first person, it is not a typical first-person shooter. Firearms are present, however, they are not often used. However, unlike many other first-person shooters, guns are particularly lethal, often killing foes with a single shot. The firearms that may be discovered or seized from adversaries are only good for as long as the magazine's current ammo lasts. After it is used up, the gun's butt can be utilized as a weapon. To make matters even more complicated, adversaries use the same ammo reserve as the player, which means that once the opponent has been eliminated, the player only gets the ammo that was left over from the combat. This pushes players to strike foes with guns as rapidly as possible in order to get the most ammunition. The emphasis of the game is on improvised combat, with players and adversaries being able to acquire and even extract weapons from their surroundings, such as locker doors, shovels, 2x4 planks, and pipes. The battle has been described as visceral by the game's creators. A quick kick may be used to fight without or alongside a handheld weapon, and attacks can be launched in a variety of directions and combinations, such as left to right or overhead, although the combat lacks a combo system. Blocking is frequently essential both before and after a good hit. When the opponent is on his knees, the player can use finishing moves like in pro wrestling, such as headbutting or breaking their neck. In comparison to previous games, the artificial intelligence demonstrated by foes forces the player to think on their feet a lot more. Enemies are adept at fleeing and hiding, frequently startling the player by suddenly emerging from a hidden location. Fainting can also be used to fool the player into blocking at inappropriate times, leaving them vulnerable to genuine assault. Some combat weapons, such as a flaming axe for a damaged door or a crowbar for a locked safe, operate as keys in the game world, allowing the player to gain access to new locations or sealed boxes. The player also possesses a taser, which stuns the victim, does some damage, and allows the player to capture the weapon of the stunned adversary. The taser also gets an upgrade later on in the game. The main setting of the game takes place in desolate urban settings with little lighting. Player must travel through the game's continually darkened landscapes with a flashlight while avoiding enemy ambushes. Condemned immerses the player in crime scene investigations, allowing them to summon a set of forensic instruments at the touch of a context-sensitive button to locate and capture evidence. Throughout the inquiry, the player character is connected to an FBI lab through his mobile phone, allowing for almost instantaneous remote examination and analysis by his support worker, Rosa. Crime scene evidence can be utilized to solve puzzles, allowing the player to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles and revealing answers to the story's larger riddles. When forensic evidence is around, the player character has the instinctive ability to detect it, allowing them to bring up the detection and collect tools as needed. However, the character's instincts merely hint at the location of the evidence. It is up to the player to scan the scene systematically and record any discoveries.
Give me a sec on this one. Partial print.
Condemned Criminal Origins received positive reviews from critics. The game, in our opinion, at Marvelous Videos, captures the hand-to-hand fighting system like no other game before it. Yes, though the game could have been longer and more diverse, but the chills that'll go down your spine when you play it will be an obvious thrill. Given that this is the first installment in the series, there are bound to be some problems in the implementation, right? You may argue that the first half of the game is a little too sluggish, with you traveling through the same subterranean tunnels and run-down buildings. The CSI mechanisms don't allow for much user interaction, instead of supplying the player with everything they need to gather evidence automatically. The main narrative is annoyingly vague, with a final boss who is nearly totally left unexplained, leaving players with the impression that important information was left out of the final game. This may or may not be a good thing, depending on who you are. Finally, there is an overabundance of find the appropriate weapon locked door problems, in which you must use a certain item to unlock a specific locked door. Condemned 2 Bloodshot. Condemned 2 Bloodshot, which is a fascinating game in its own right, was released as a sequel to Condemned Criminal Origins. In nearly every regard, it's a step forward mechanically, with developer Monolith pushing down on the harsh melee combat and honing it into something that still stands out today. They also took the plot to an intriguing route, with Ethan having suffered a setback as a result of the events of the previous game. He's virtually homeless now, and when one of his co-workers contacts him about a strange murder, he's dragged back into the city's turmoil. For a time, it maintains the same powerful mood as the original initially, but the original game's scenery and action had a remarkable level of restraint, while this game becomes a full-on action game with the enemies being more over the top than ever. The events of Condemned 2 Bloodshot occur 11 months after those of the previous game. The strange condition that has caused mad violence and mass insanity among Metro Metropolis's homeless population has only worsened, with enormous riots erupting across the city. After resigning from the FBI's serial crime unit following the events of the Serial Killer X investigation, protagonist Ethan Thomas has fallen into a downward spiral and is now homeless, aggressive, and an alcoholic.
That's me, Ethan Thomas. Drunk, tired, and pissed off. Why? Because this damn city's too fucking blind.
His drunkenness emerges as a hostile alter ego who teases him during his hallucinations, and he still has paranormal visions. Ethan is recalled to the SCU on Director Farrell's instructions to investigate the murder of his former mentor, Malcolm Van Horn. He is supported by his former companion, Rosa, and is led by SCU's tactical commander, Agent Dorland, who is hostile and adversarial. During Ethan's inquiry, he learns that his arch-enemy serial killer X is still alive, having been nursed back to health by his uncle Malcolm Van Horn after being shot in the head at the conclusion of the first Condemned. Serial killer X murders Malcolm Van Horn and Mayor Rachel Mars of Metro City, then kidnaps Director Farrell. This is a psychological horror video game similar to the first, played from a first-person perspective with melee fighting. Hand-to-hand fighting, melee combat, and first-person shooting are all included in the game. In the forensic analysis of crime sites, the game also incorporates adventure game components. Condemned 2 allows for hand-to-hand fighting with the player's bare hands, with the left and right triggers manipulating the player's left and right fisted palms, respectively, unlike the original game. In addition, the player may now use chain attack combinations together, as well as perform numerous finishing techniques via QuickTime events. Context-sensitive environmental killings, like pushing an enemy's head into a TV or a spiked wall, are also included in the game. The sequel includes melee weapons and guns, much like the previous game. Melee weapons, on the other hand, now shatter after a few blows or blocks, pushing the player to master the new hand-to-hand fighting system. Because the player is unable to carry extra ammo, guns are restricted to the bullets in the current magazine, much like in the original game. Ethan's alcoholism adds a new wrinkle to the firearms battles, since it causes his aim to become fuzzy and unstable, unless he drinks occasionally. Condemned 2 has more firearms fighting than the previous game, with a few stages devoted to firefights with opponents holding assault rifles. In-depth forensic investigative gaming is also included in the game. Players can explore and document various parts of a crime scene, as well as make remarks regarding the crime's nature. Correctly predicting the crime's nature gets the player a higher score, which might lead to upgrades, like brass knuckles or body armor. Several Bloodshot Fight Club maps are also included, which are action-based stages unrelated to the storytelling of the game. Ethan can also employ new abilities throughout the game. In this installment, his instinct talents are mostly abandoned. Although he does get some valuable combat abilities, Ethan may conduct strong chain combos by building up a combo meter, which starts a short sequence requiring well-timed or fast-paced button hits in order to cause huge damage. Ethan obtains the power of the voice later in the game. This ability lets him burst apart doors, explode opponent heads, and demolish Oro's headpieces with a tremendous shockwave from his lips. The game also features a multiplayer mode. Depending on the game's mode, there are a total of 9 maps. The game has 4 multiplayer modes and supports up to 8 players online. The 4 different modes are Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Bum Rush, and Crime Scenes. Deathmatch is where the player with the most kills after the time limit, or who reaches the kill limit, first wins. 2 teams of many players battle for the highest number of kills in a team deathmatch. SCU agents versus influenced bums in Bum Rush, a time-based game. The SCU can't respawn, but they do get to use firearms, have a lot more health, and can kill with a single shot or melee. And they have to outlast the bums for as long as possible. Another game type that pits SCU agents against the influenced is crime scenes. Before time runs out, the influenced must hide 2 cases of evidence, while the SCU agents must locate and scan the evidence using their technology. Despite its narrative shortcomings, the game received generally excellent reviews. Everyone praised the think-out-of-the-box technique of the game and loved the action. Unfortunately, the second game did not sell well enough to warrant a 3rd installment. Instead, Monolith produced the ill-fated Gotham City Imposters and the Middle-earth Shadow of War titles. The original game is now only available on Steam, and if you want to play the sequel legally, you'll need to find a functional Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3, as well as a copy of the game, since it is yet to be re-released in any form. It's a shame that a series with so many fantastic portions has faded away, because horror gaming is now bigger than it's ever been. What happened to Condemned 3? Since the release of Condemned 2, there have been rumors regarding a sequel, but it was thought that a Condemned 3 would never happen. In an interview with video game website NeoGAF, one of the former developers of the Condemned series stated, "Regrettably, this will never happen. Condemned 2 just didn't make enough sales. Condemned 2's inclusion in the everything needs multiplayer trend is unfortunate. We could have put the team to better use on multiplayer to make the single-player campaign even better. There were a few solid suggestions on where the game may go. I've always wanted to make a reset and play Condemned 2 as if it were a horrible hangover, bringing Thomas closer to his condemned criminal origin self." That's a fascinating perspective on the entire IP situation. In most circumstances, independent developers must battle, struggle, and attempt to get abandoned intellectual property, or in some cases, companies such as Harebrained Schemes, which were able to obtain the Shadowrun IP but were still bound by Microsoft's restrictions, as reported by Inside Mac Games. The rights to the Condemned series are presently held by Monolith co-founder and former CEO Jace Hall, who announced his desire in finding the proper independent development team to take over the franchise and drive it forward in January 2015. It's not often that gamers get a glimpse inside the inner workings of how major franchises are created, but that chance is ripe for the taking if it falls into the hands of the proper indie firm. Condemned is also one of those gaming brands that may make a fantastic comeback in an already popular subgenre that has seen titles like Slender Man and Five Nights at Freddy's. Take It finds its niche in mainstream notoriety. Another terror survival game with a strong concentration on melee fighting may be welcomed by the community with open arms. That's it for this one. If you liked this video, then please do like, share, and comment on what you thought about it. And if you are new here, then please do subscribe to our channel. See you in the next one.